It is Tuesday's episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I have my boy Steele Roden back alongside me, my co-host. He is back in the booth, baby, and it is time to take a deep look at the Colorado Avalanche side of things, their path to the Stanley Cup. Yesterday, we broke down the Tampa Bay Lightnings. Today, we will do so with the Colorado Avalanche. Take a look at their keys to success, some weaknesses, and, of course, some big-time bets, baby. Let's get right into it.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, party people? In the place to be for hockey, fantasy, and everything you need to stack that paper, baby. It is the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast with Steele and Flip back in full swing, baby. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day, Monday to Friday, hot and fresh. New episodes rolling out the door every single day. Make sure you are tuned in and tapped in for all the latest. Like I said, Steele is back, the birthday boy. It is Gemini season, but it is also finals season, baby. Tampa Bay Lightning, Colorado Avalanche, the best team in both conference, going toe-to-toe, Steele, for Lord Stanley's mug. Talked about the Tampa Bay Lightning, John Cooper, their resiliency, their killer instinct on yesterday's episode. And I also talked about, Steele, and I want to know your thoughts on this. This is a very different opponent that the Tampa Bay Lightning are facing this year. This isn't the 2020 Dallas Stars or the 2021 Montreal Canadiens. So why don't we start right there? This is a different quality of team, the Colorado Avalanche, and let's talk about how good they are and what makes them that good, Steele.
Yeah, this is a different situation for the Tampa Bay Lightning. They haven't really been put up to the test since the first round against the Toronto Maple Leafs, the team that took them all the way to 7 games. We thought that it would have been a great series, the Battle of Florida with the Florida Panthers. They get swept by the Tampa Bay Lightning. We both think the New York Rangers are winning in 6. It's the Tampa Bay Lightning winning in 6. So
yes, sir.
We've had a couple of, I had the Leafs in the first round. You had the Lightning in the first round. It was literally a coin flip with that series. But this is a different opponent for the Tampa Bay Lightning. We're talking about even after the Tampa Bay Lightning won back-to-back Stanley Cup after back-to-back champs, the Colorado Avalanche came into the season as the favorites to win the Stanley Cup. And then Tampa Bay Lightning were right behind them at, I believe, plus 650 at the time to start this season. What the Colorado Avalanche have been able to do so far in the playoffs has just been absolutely ridiculous. They've only lost 2 games so far. Yeah. They've swept 2 series. I'm really excited to see this battle between the back-to-back champs and the team that is looking to win their first Stanley Cup championship in 20 years.
I think it's going to be a true test of this Tampa Bay Lightning team. I talked a lot about it yesterday on yesterday's episode. They're borderline dynasty, and they're right there in the mix, in my opinion. I mentioned a bunch of teams over the past 30, 40 years. New York Islanders, Edmonton Oilers, even Detroit Red Wings, Pittsburgh Penguins, even all in that conversation for potential dynasty-like franchises. And they're right on the doorstep. But what I was really looking at is this is going to be a true test because Colorado is firing on all cylinders. And, I just read a report just before starting this show, Steele, is Kadri and Cogliano are both potentials for game 1 tomorrow night. And that's just another tick in the column for the Colorado Avalanche's depth because we know that those big names stepped up in the absence of Kadri, Mikko Rantanen, Gabriel Landeskog, and, of course, Nathan MacKinnon. And I really do think it's going to come down to the big guns on both sides who gets it done because it's been clear in the lead up for both teams, both of these teams' big guns have answered the bell. On one side, Steven Stamkos, Andrei Vasilevsky, Victor Hedman, Andre Palat. On the other side, the guys we just mentioned, McKinnon, Makar, Landeskog, Rantanen, they've all stepped up. So really, who is going to be the group to really push their team over the top, Steele? And I'm just excited to see it all unfold because I think you can agree with me on this. This is the dream finale, top toast of each conference, in my opinion.
This is the dream finale, and this is why, to me, that June is the best month of the year. A, it's summertime. B, it's both our birthdays. C, it's the Stanley Cup Finals, and this is exactly what everyone has been waiting for. We didn't want to see the Tampa Bay Lightning against the Montreal Canadiens last year. We didn't want to see the Tampa Bay Lightning against the Dallas Stars the year before that. No, we didn't want to see that. We wanted to see this: the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Colorado Avalanche, the best of the best, facing each other and going the distance. So this is exactly what we've been waiting for. And you're right. The stars from each of these teams have really stepped up in a big way. And if Nazem Kadri is able to come back for game one, that is huge for the Colorado Avalanche, especially when you're going up against the instigators, Patrick Maroon and Corey Perry.
Yes. And you've made a great job of highlighting the fact that what does Tampa Bay do when they get a little bit behind the eight ball? They get dirty. They get gritty. They roll those bottom third and fourth lines with regularity. And those guys on those lines are gritty. You mentioned Patrick Maroon, Bellemare, Corey Perry. This is going to be the difference in this series. And like you said, if the Colorado Avalanche can get Nazem Kadri back, also 6 goals and 8 assists for 14 points in 13 games before getting hurt, that is a difference maker for the Colorado Avalanche. And, right around the break, Steele, I want to talk about how they got here through the Nashville Predators, through the St. Louis Blues, and then the Edmonton Oilers, because I want to really get your insight on what you think. Is that a true enough test to see what this Colorado team is made of? Let's talk about that around the break. But before that, let me hit you with some new talking points from our pals at Built Bar. That's right. They are always coming up with that new fire. And this time, Built has truly outdone themselves with the new mud pie flavor. And for the first time ever, Built is introducing this mud pie via a bar and a puff. That's right, it's both. Don't know what a mud pie tastes like? Well, if you're a chocolate fan like Steele and I, this is a whipped cream chocolate mousse smothered in 100% real chocolate and topped with cookies and cream crumble. Stay with me, people. Not convinced yet? We've saved the best for last. They're actually good for you. No, really. All Built products, this, come low in calorie, high in protein, and most important of all, they are low in sugar. They are packed with 16 grams of protein, these mud pies, and only 150 calories. Tap in now. Just like all other Built bars, they are covered in 100% delicious real chocolate, and they also have the chocolate mousse, whipped cream, cookies and cream flavor. Stop drooling. Go to Built.com. Order your box of mud pie and puffs right now. You won't regret it. Go to Built.com. Use the promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order.
Thank you for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Real quick, we have an important favor to ask you out there. We've put together a survey so we can learn more about our listeners like you and make your favorite Locked On podcast even better. This is your opportunity to tell us what you like and don't like about Locked On Podcast. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey right now to get started. It doesn't take very long, and everyone that completes the survey can qualify for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Ticketmaster gift cards. To take our audience survey, once again, that is go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey. And thank you so much for your help, and thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Big Flip and myself. We're going to get to the strength and weaknesses of the Colorado Avalanche later in this episode. But first, we got to talk about how they got to the Stanley Cup Finals in the last 5 years it took, as well as the first 3 rounds it took this season. Flip, was it a true test for the Colorado Avalanche? That's a great question.
Thank you.
They go up against the Nashville Predators in the first round, and they're without UC Saros. Connor Ingram actually comes in and he played a spectacular game 2 through 4 for the Nashville Predators, trying to give them a chance. Wasn't enough, but yeah, they were without UC Saros for the round 1. St. Louis, they go up against St. Louis. Obviously some more goaltending issues, as well as Torrey Krug was out of the lineup for a couple of games. And then the Edmonton Oilers get swept as well. So was this a true test?
See, this is what I was talking about yesterday, Steele, because we know, and you just mentioned it, the Toronto Maple Leafs, whatever their shortcomings were, they pushed Tampa Bay to the brink. They went blow for blow with the Tampa Bay Lightning. I've said this a few times. And then they just come out and absolutely paste the Florida Panthers in a 4-0 showing, hold them to 3 goals. And then another very good team in the New York Rangers. And I'm not trying to take away from anything that the Nashville Predators, St. Louis Blues, or Edmonton Oilers are doing. But I think any hockey fan can admit right off the jump, who's had the easier path to the cup. And in my opinion, that's clearly the Colorado Avalanche, because aside from the St. Louis Blues series, they haven't been tested, and it's not even been close. So if I'm a Colorado Avalanche fan, I'm a little bit worried because long answer, really long. I don't think it is enough of a test, Steele. And I think you will see the absolute best from the Tampa Bay Lightning from the puck drop to really push this Colorado Avalanche team around a little bit and show them who is the two-time reigning Cup champs. That's why I think it's even more critical if Nazem Kadri can lace them up for game one from the jump. I think that really can be one of those momentum-shifting factors in this series, especially because, again, to get back to it, they don't seem as tested as the Tampa Bay Lightning. I don't know what you think about that, pal.
I agree with you. I don't think they were as tested as the Tampa Bay Lightning, but from my perspective, that's also because the competition out in the Western divisions weren't as tough in the Eastern Conference in the Eastern Conference teams, because you have the LA Kings, the Edmonton Oilers. You know, the Calgary Flames were probably a top team that could have given the Colorado Avalanche a little bit of a test, but we know how over the last couple of years that even if they get past the first round, they don't show up in the second or the third, where they can't even make it to the third. So I think the competition out west wasn't up to par, or as up to par as we saw out in the East. You know, the Edmonton Oilers, the LA Kings, the Nashville Predators. I think the biggest competition was obviously the St. Louis Blues and the Minnesota Wild. It would obviously the Blues face them, but either of those teams who faced the Colorado Avalanche, we're going to give them the biggest test of the postseason up until the Stanley Cup Finals, now that we know it's against the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think at the end of it all, Steele, I am just more than ready to see this shake out on the ice because, yesterday we talked about a lot about the Tampa Bay Lightning. We're talking all about the Colorado Avalanche today. Make sure you stay tuned for tomorrow's episode where Steele and I will serve up all of our picks, bets, series predictions, Cup final winner, of course. Make sure you're tapped in for that. But realistically, Steele, this is the two best teams in the league. That doesn't happen very often, and you said it already. We didn't see the finals we wanted to see the last couple of years, unless you're a Tampa Bay fan, unless you're maybe a Stars fan or a Canadiens fan. So that's okay. And at the end of it all, I just think we're in for another 7-gamer, and we're not going to get away with any predictions or anything as of yet. Like I said, stay tuned for tomorrow's episode. But how they got here, Steele, the Colorado Avalanche, it is an interesting perspective because also there was tons made about the rest for Tampa Bay after the second round. Well, the Colorado Avalanche have all kinds of rest. So will we see any rust, or will it be the opposite? Because, and I'll leave it at this for this segment, Steele, the Tampa Bay Lightning have played more hockey than any other team the past 3 years. And that's clear. Yeah. Now it's probably way in an amount of games that makes a difference. So we'll see, because now all of a sudden the rested team is the Colorado Avalanche. They were rolling. We'll break down the weaknesses and strengths here in a second, because I think there's a couple interesting points in net, behind the bench, up front, special teams. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, for me, I don't think the rest is going to play any factor for the Colorado Avalanche, because it didn't seem to play any part, against the St. Louis Blues or against the Edmonton Oilers as well. So I think it is, obviously we've seen teams who have had rest, just go into the second round and absolutely fold like a cheap lawn chair. And then we've seen teams like the Colorado Avalanche this year who they need the rest. You're banged up. You need the rest, as much rest as you can. So I think I don't think it's going to play as much as a factor, but again, this is the Tampa Bay Lightning. This is going to be the hardest test they've had so far this postseason. But yeah, let's talk about the Colorado Avalanche's strength and weaknesses so far this postseason. For me, this is kind of nitpicking right now, but they haven't been as great in the face-off circles this entire postseason. They're only winning face-offs at 47%. So it's not terrible, but they've still been able to keep rolling without winning those face-offs and being able to break out of their zone with ease and not really have a difficult time getting the puck back in transition. For me, I think the biggest weakness for the Avalanche is clearly the goaltending. Yeah. And the stats aren't that bad, actually. Francouz, he's 6-0, a 2.87 goals against average with a .906 save percentage. Darcy Kemper, he's 6-2. 2.65 goals against average, and an .897 save percentage. So the stats aren't bad, but they're not great either.
Mm.
The good thing for the Colorado Avalanche is that they're able, if one of them doesn't show up in a game, they're able to depend on the backup goaltender. It's not like that for the Tampa Bay Lightning. You're not going to put Brian Elliott in the crease ever.
No.
So if Vasilevsky has back-to-back terrible games, you just have to keep rolling with him.
It's a really good point, Steele. And I talked about it yesterday because, I really was trying to just bring up a couple of the chinks in the armor for both sides of these teams. And you're spot on with the Colorado Avalanche because there's a reason Pavel Francouz has been a backup for his entire career for the most part. This is Andrei Vasilevsky and the two-time reigning Cup champions. So now it's really time to put up or shut up. And like you said, though, they do have a little bit of a backup ace in the hole with Darcy Kemper a little bit. He hasn't played in a while, so there's that question mark there. But for sure, Brian Elliott is not going anywhere near the cage, and that's because of how good Andrei Vasilevsky is and how good he has been. And for me, that's definitely a question mark. Another question mark, and it's not necessarily a weakness, but, John Cooper, for me, has been one of those guys that can out-coach the opposition. And no disrespect to Jared Bednar, but John Cooper is an elite-level coach, and he's one that, I talked up a ton yesterday, and I'm going to continue to talk up because he deserves a Jack Adams, and the fact that he doesn't have one yet is an absolute crime. But that is one of those more, intangible situations where I got to give the check mark to the Tampa Bay Lightning. They've also been back to the Stanley Cup with this staff, back-to-back now 3 years running. The Colorado Avalanche, I know, are a good team, but I'm giving the edge behind the bench to John Cooper and the Tampa Bay Lightning, and that might be one of the more boring, strength and weaknesses of this series, but I don't care. I think it's one that might make a difference, Steele. Last change. Matchups. You mentioned the face-off dot. Let's see what happens, but I would say that that's one of the more, I'm not going to go as far as to say a weakness for the Colorado Avalanche, but it's definitely a check in the column of the Tampa Bay Lightning.
I completely agree because we've seen John Cooper being able to do this in the NHL as well as on the international stage.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. The fact that he doesn't have a Jack Adams at this point in his career is kind of mind-boggling to me. Yeah. So if he doesn't win one this year or in the next couple of seasons, something is clearly up and not going in John Cooper's favor. But I would agree. I think the edge, it's definitely not a weakness for the Colorado Avalanche. We're just praising how well John Cooper has done for the Tampa Bay Lightning organization.
Exactly. And hey, that's something that I'm going to stick to my guns on. And one of the things that I think the Colorado Avalanche need to stick to their guns on is relying on Cale Makar. And I don't know, again, if we're going to say necessarily a strength or a weakness, but let's just say it's right in the middle because Tampa Bay Lightning also rely on Victor Hedman a lot. But I really do see that matchup between Victor Hedman and Cale Makar being an absolutely pivotal one for the direction of this series. And I don't just mean on the defensive end. These guys are going to need to put up offensively, continue to do what they've done. Kucherov is starting to roll. But let's talk about, for me, Steele, where I think a weakness for the Colorado Avalanche is, and it's in that bottom 4D. And I know Devin Taves has been great, but I'm going to tip the hand to Sergachev, McDonough, those guys on the Tampa Bay Lightning side of thing. And again, this is nitpicking because weaknesses here on a Stanley Cup final team will be like, Flip, come on, is it really that weak? It's not, and they're here for a reason. But when you go head-to-head, I don't know about you, Steele, and maybe this is a hot take, but I'm going to take the Tampa Bay Lightning's blue line over the Colorado Avalanche's. Obviously, Cale Makar is a part of it, but I'm going with Tampa. I don't know what you think about that.
This is probably one of the few times I'm going to have to disagree with you because I would take the Colorado Avalanche's blue line every single day of the week. And that's actually what I wanted to talk about for the Avalanche's strength so far this postseason. Not their blue line specifically, but their depth players on the blue line as well as their forward core. The depth for the Avalanche have been a lot better than the Tampa Bay Lightning so far this year. Just if you look at towards the Lightning side of things, their depth players haven't really been that productive. Like besides Corey Perry, who's been great offensively, as well as Andre Palat, Nick Paul, he's got 7 points in the postseason. He's been great so far in the third line. Anthony Cirelli has been absolutely terrible. 5 points in 17 games. He's kind of been a ghost out there. Done anything since he's been acquired. by the Chicago Blackhawks as well. And then you look down their lineup as well. Alex Killorn, 4 assists, 0 goals. Eric Chernak, 1 goal, 1 point in 17 games. Bogosian, 2 points. Ruda, 3 points. They're not really getting anything. McDonough, 4 points as well. They're not really getting anything from those bottom 4 defensive, from the Lightning, as well as their bottom 6 forwards, besides Corey Perry and Patrick Maroon. But when you go to the Colorado Avalanche side of things, they're getting a ton of depth scoring, not just from their bottom 6 forwards, but a decent amount from their bottom 4 defensemen as well. Josh Manson, 6 points. Eric Johnson, 5 points. Lehkonen, he's got 11 this year. Devin Taves, he's got 13. Byram, he's got 7. Nichushkin, he's got 9 points. So you're getting a little bit more depth scoring from the Colorado Avalanche side of things than the Tampa Bay Lightning. And that's what I'm looking forward to seeing because we've talked about the trade acquisitions for both these teams. I think the Colorado Avalanche are in, I'm leaning towards them with the advantage for their depth scoring.
Depth scoring for sure. I guess what I was trying to point out was this is a defensive group that held the high-powered, the highest scoring team in the league, Florida Panthers, to 3 goals in 4 games. That's all kind of impressive. And if we're talking about a guy having 5 points and a guy having 7 points, I'm going to say that's a moot point. But you're spot on with the depth scoring up front. Colorado's has been better. They stepped up and answered the bell. But when it comes to the defensive side of things, I'm going to say after shutting down all of that firepower on the Rangers and holding the Florida Panthers to 3 goals, I'm going to give the edge to the Tampa Bay Lightning just a little bit. But overall, Steele, the Colorado Avalanche open up as -190 favorites. I don't know if that's a fair number. I would say this is a much more of a coin flip series. I definitely see it going 7 games. We're not going to give away our predictions, but that's for tomorrow's episode. Bets, X factors, series winner, cup winner, of course. And realistically, Steele, at the end of the day, just looking at these numbers up and down, past 5 games, Kucherov 8 points, Makar 9 points, Stamkos 4 goals, Comfer 5 goals. This is going to be an even series, and you said it. Which bottom 6 forward group is going to step up? And I really do think that could be the determining factor in this series.
Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. And thank you so much for tuning in to this episode today. We are free wherever you get your podcast, which also includes YouTube. So if you haven't yet, hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. And thank you so much for tuning in for this episode. Flip, I absolutely think you're right. I think the depth scoring is going to be a factor in this series. I am not sure whether this will go 6 or 7. I know who I've picked for who I think is going to win the finals. I'm not going to say it right now because we're saving that for tomorrow's episode.
Yes, sir.
But I think you're right. The depth scoring is really going to be a factor in this series, and that's why I wanted to highlight that from the Avalanche for the Avalanches as a strength, because I think their depth scoring and the guys they brought into the organization at the deadline and as well as over the last couple of years have made a big difference.
These deadline moves, Steele, are sometimes overlooked at this time of year, but it can't be overlooked because some of these names are really getting it done for the Colorado Avalanche. And maybe it's time for the Nick Pauls and the Hagels of the world to answer the bell for the Tampa Bay Lightning because, those were the moves that, Brisebois in the front office made the moves for. And those are the guys that they're going to have to count on because, the big guys on the Colorado Avalanche are going to get it done. That they're going to be there to put up the goal scoring. So can that, addition, secondary scoring for the Tampa Bay Lightning answer the bell? It's going to be one of those things. Is Victor Hedman and Cale Makar, who's going to get the best of those? What kind of goaltending situation is going to show up for the Colorado Avalanche? Really, it's those 3 scenarios for me. Depth scoring, Cale Makar versus Victor Hedman on the blue line, and then what happens in the cage for the Colorado Avalanche. Because in my opinion, 6-0 for Francouz is nice, but you got to go with Andrei Vasilevsky's 2 rings. He's reigning Conn Smythe winner, I believe, as well. Maybe we'll talk about some of those odds tomorrow as well, Steele, because I don't think the Conn Smythe is also such an open and shut case as everyone else is saying.
There's a lot of players that, we've seen a lot of players step up in the last 2 rounds, especially in big ways. And there's some big names in the Stanley Cup Finals. So I think you're right. I think the Conn Smythe is not, set in stone right now. There's a couple of odds that we needed to dive into. And real quick, before we wrap everything up, we're not going to talk about our predictions, but I wanted to say this real quick before we end the show today.
Do it.
Patrick Maroon can win his 4th consecutive Stanley Cup ring, or Corey Perry can lose in the finals for 3 consecutive years in a row. So it's really exciting to see what might happen. And, if the curse stays with Corey Perry or if it favors Patrick Maroon at this point. So I'm really excited to see what happens with those 2 guys in the Stanley Cup Finals.
Most definitely. This is the dream finale. Mentioned it a few times. This is exactly what hockey fans wanted to see. Of course, unless you were loyal to the teams that bowed out, but we're not here for that. Thank you very much. But what you should be here for, and I keep mentioning it because it is a tease, Steele and I are going to be tapped in all off season long. We are breaking down positions, X factors, mock drafts, sleepers, veteran guys you need to target. This is the hub for everything you need to know to beast mode your draft. So make sure you run out there right now and smash that subscribe button, because trust me, you want to win some money next season, this is the podcast to be listening to. So tap that subscribe, tap the follow button, and tap into all the info you need to stack that paper, baby. That's all I got to say, Steele.
I love it, Flip. Let's stack the paper. Let's get this money. We've been rolling. We hope that you're rolling out there too. And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. But for your second listen, you have to check out Locked On NHL. From the first round matchups to each Stanley Cup kiss, Locked On NHL covers the playoffs like no other. Hear the latest news and opinions from local experts every Monday through Friday. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast, just like this podcast right here. So if you haven't yet, again, hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. And once you do, you'll get the latest episodes of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast as soon as they're available each and every day, Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. Thank you so much again for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there. And we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.